you feeling, Loren?
I'm good.
Okay.
Ready to go. Ready to roll.
All right.
RTR. Ready to roll?
Oh, is that a thing?
I don't know. Make the hell out of me.
Ask the kids. Hello, Loren.
Hi, Kelsey. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Reflective, feeling good about things this time of year.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's your favorite part about this time of year?
Oh, things, the change of the seasons, the slowing down of the pace, the celebration of life and people, the cookies.
Oh, the cookies. Do not forget the cookies. I like it. I made this like cinnamon crumble thing for dessert on Thanksgiving. It was really good.
Did you have a nice Thanksgiving?
I had a wonderful Thanksgiving. It was just the right amount of crazy and relaxing and
Family and football?
all the football. I think there was a pretty big game this weekend.
Yeah, there was a big game. Go Blue.
Were you at the game?
I was at the game. Yes, we were at the game, and it was electric. It was cold, but it was warm and fan fervor. It was awesome. Just awesome.
Did you rush the field?
No, I left that to the kids.
Oh. Did you rush to your car to beat everyone?
I stayed for a little bit because it's so cool to see everybody rushing the field. And, when the game ends the way it did with that interception and, the rivalry coming, I just stood there and kind of watched it for a bit. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. 110,000 people, and we tailgated, and we just had a great time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an epic game. I was on the edge of my seat. I was watching it at a bar where the bartender was dressed in Ohio State gear from head to toe. And I sat down. I was like, are we going to have a problem? Do I need to change locations?
In the NACAS episode that we recorded, I felt the need to apologize to our friends from Ohio, and maybe I need to do that again. Maybe we should start every episode with, now that I feel like I'm, dishing on our Ohio friends.
I mean, the facts are the facts right now.
3 wins in a row, don't lie.
Yeah. All in good fun, right?
All in good fun.
It all ebbs and flows.
And it made up for that Lions lost. Oh. The Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving. Horrible.
Yeah, that was brutal.
Typical. SOL. Same old Lions.
Come on. They need to get it together. Well, we're here recording. We're actually in Charlotte in the podcast studio. And Corey, our producer, reminded us that this is the first time we've been back live in person since we started. Is that true? I think that's true.
Yeah.
So
back here anyways.
Back here, yeah. So we're recording the final episode of season 1.
Season 1.
How's that feel?
Surprising and good. I didn't know if we'd make it through one whole season, to be honest with you.
Come on, Loren.
Well, I figured when we started, we would try to do a year and see if people tuned in. People have. See if we were having fun, right?
Yeah.
So, it's I guess a little surprising but gratifying. How about for you?
Yeah, I think I agree with those words.
Yeah.
That's great. It's been 21, this will be 22 episodes in that year. It's been a lot of work. I think I continue to sit in that space where I have enough delusion going into something where I'm like, this is going to be great. And then we start doing it. And I'm like, well, there's a lot that goes into it. But I've loved every part of it. The guests that we've had have been amazing. I've met some new people and learned a lot about people that I didn't know, and you along the way.
Yeah, it's been
myself.
Fun. Yep. What have you learned about yourself that has surprised you or been most delighting? Or
it's a great question. I've learned a lot of things. I'm trying to decide what I actually want to share. If I'm being honest. I mean, I think when you go into a creative venture with people that you don't know all that well, you're constantly learning along the way. I think I've been lucky in my career to be in positions in creating new experiences or environments or programs where I've kind of led the charge and the group's coming along and there's ideas along the way. But I really feel like this has been a co-created thing. And so to actually, I don't know, step back and listen to other ideas and bring ideas to the table and see how it all comes together. It's really been a learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, when I think about the year, it's been interesting to figure out what's the sweet spot to prepare, because you really shouldn't do this without preparing. I mean, it should be honored. The work and the creativity and the seriousness with which we should take our guests shouldn't be done without preparation. But to find that sweet spot between preparation and not over-preparing, because I've really enjoyed the conversations and the journeys that they go on, and how to be a better listener, so that, because in that story that they have are other questions, which I couldn't have imagined asking until we got into it, right? So to not over-prepare. Early, I felt like I had to prepare too much, and I had a lot of questions I wanted to ask of people. But I found it a little easier to prepare because I wasn't over-preparing as we went on, too.
I like that. Was it Sally Darden who said, y'all sent me questions and then didn't ask me any of them?
Yeah.
So
That's how we roll.
I guess we found that balance between prepared and
yeah. We actually had all the questions, and we just kept sending them out as if we were going to ask them like we did in the first few episodes, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other piece that's been interesting is there's some people, and you can have these casual conversations, and then you turn a microphone on, you start recording, and everyone gets a little stiff.
Yes.
Even myself, right? I feel like I'm a pretty free-flowing, casual person, and I listen back to some of the episodes, and I'm like, oh, you were pretty stiff, which then made the guest stiff, which made the other things, So how do you create a formal yet relaxed environment?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Did you ever get used to hearing your own voice, which we talked about in the middle of the season?
Yeah, I've just given up on even judging it, thinking about it.
Yeah. It's gotten easier for me. It's still a little jarring to hear myself. And people say, well, how do you feel like it went? I don't really know how it went until I hear it. Honestly, I don't know how it went until I hear the episode. And then it's a little jarring to hear the way I asked questions and things. But I have gotten used to the sound of my own voice. And my favorite episodes have been when I was just kind of rolling with the conversation and something spontaneous occurred.
Yeah,
So,
I would agree with that. Yeah. To your point about what questions you asked, it's like, as you're re-listening to the episode, it's less about judgment of my voice and how I sound, and more like, oh, what am I going to say? Oh, wait, what is Loren going to say? Oh, yeah, we did good. Okay. Or, oh gosh, that could have been way better.
Yeah. What was a favorite moment during the year? I won't ask you to rank the guests.
Oh, yeah. We'll do that at the end. So you have to listen to the whole episode to find out who our favorite guest was. Gosh, I don't know that I have a favorite moment. Do you have a favorite moment that you thought of?
I don't have a moment. I have moments that were very similar in all of the episodes when a guest, a friend really, these people were or became friends if we didn't know them in advance. When a friend shared something that was sort of deeply personal, and I won't describe them. I'll let people for themselves figure out what that means. But, it was pretty frequently that somebody would say something that surprised me with their honesty, or surprised me with their history, or surprised me with their vulnerability. Those were my favorite moments because I felt like they were really inviting us to be part of their lives right in that moment. You know what I mean? I mean, there's the story, and they're always interesting, but when that story is very personal or very revealing, those were my favorite moments because it felt like something it's like a little present we have to be very careful with.
Totally. And a reminder that we're all human. I think a lot of the people and the guests that we had on hold varying positions and titles with authority, or put on or put in a certain box, or present a certain way, or whatever that might be, or we have perceptions of. And in the end, we're all human, and everyone has a story behind that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say quite a few of these people I knew reasonably well, or a little bit. Not everybody, but and so the other thing about those stories was it was a different dimension. It reminded me, oh, these are just people trying to make a go of it, like me. When I feel sort of broken or incapable of doing something, and you see these images of people that are leading at some scale or have led something or initiated something, it's like, yeah, they're just people, and they've got some real things they've had to overcome as well, or are overcoming, maybe still in the act of, and it's reminded me how human we all are.
Yeah. I'm mostly just grateful that they all said yes to us somewhere along the line.
Thank goodness. This would be a lousy podcast with no guests, right?
With no guests, just you and I. I mean, I think people like hearing from us, but not every episode. Yeah. So grateful that people said yes. So speaking of leadership lessons and that people are learning along the way, what's a leadership lesson or a leadership thing that you're working on right now?
Patience. I think earlier in the season you said something about one of the things you had learned is get on the train. We're moving in this direction. I remember you telling that story, and though I might have different words for it, that I have always been a bit of a hard charger. I've tried to always do that with a deft and soft touch, but let's be clear. I have fire in the belly to get something done, and so I'm trying to be a little more patient. And those human stories about what people have overcome or overcoming helps me remember that you have to attend to where people are in those journeys in order for them to feel like they have a seat on that train. So I'm trying to learn patience a little bit more with people and where they are and what they're going through. And that's always been a struggle for me, always. So if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I might have said patience. If you asked me 10 years now, I might say I'm still working on patience. That's just always something that, and reminded of through this podcast, I'm still working on.
Yeah, it's an onion, right? I think patience or anything we're working on that's kind of core to who we are feels like you have to keep peeling back the layers. And just when you think you're like, I've got patience down, then something else comes around that really tests you. Yeah. You're like, maybe I don't have that down.
When I graduated, when I graduated from college, my mother was very proud. And she said, you were such a hard charger, so strong-willed. Your father and I always used to say, he's either going to do great things or go straight to prison. And I said, well, there's time for both, Mom. It's time for both. So I think that that's obvious to people too, that sort of strong-willed nature. So I've just got to dial it back a little now and then. Well,
that's emotional intelligence, right?
Okay,
self-awareness.
We'll call it that.
Self-awareness, when to use
That's generous.
Yeah, I hear you on the patience thing. The piece I'm working on is this kind of being present and really trying to sense my way into what is my next phase of contribution to leadership. I think to this point, the role has dictated what my leadership contribution would be, the title itself, the kind of box or structure that I stepped into. And now I get to sit in a space where it is evolving and the contributions are somewhat endless, but to be meaningful, impactful, they need to be intentional. Mm-hmm. And so really just sitting back and taking space to decide where does my time, energy, contributions have the biggest impact for what's next in my career.
Do you feel more able to say no to things than you once did? Or even from last year that don't fit where you want to be intentional?
I do. I don't like saying no. I really struggle with the no thing because I want to do all things for all people. But at this phase, no has to be part of the equation. And more in setting boundaries, I think has been
boundaries.
Yeah. The kind of the work the last couple of months in particular, because variety of different things have been occurring in past spaces, current spaces, whatever. And it's like, you know what? I actually am not in that place anymore. So how do I set a stage and boundary for myself so that I can move forward to the work that needs to be done?
Do you feel like saying no is something you're better able to do than earlier in your career?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Do you feel that way?
Oh, totally. Totally. I am so protective now. I don't know if it's my career change. I spent so many years in like you, in higher ed where there's very few boundaries around. I mean, it's a 24/7 operation, 365. I mean, there's just no boundaries around it. And it all, and the scope was big, and it all felt necessary, and everybody had requests. And so maybe the career change has helped with that a little bit. There's just sort of natural boundaries on how things work, in what I do now. But I also am older and more and clearer about what adds value to my life, what might add value to my job, what kinds of things will be distracting versus strategic. And also, I just sort of, this sounds horrible, but I think I had said this in one of our earlier episodes, I also just care a little less what people think, It's like, well, I don't like disappointing people, but they will be disappointed, and I hope they're okay with it. I just don't care as much. So I'm less apt to say yes if it disappoints somebody because of these other reasons, and my comfort, just say no. And that, I think, just comes from, honestly, maybe age or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think age plays a big part of it. The one question that I've been asking myself over and over when I'm trying to make a decision, it's like, to what end? To what end am I doing this? Or thinking about it, saying yes to it, worried about it, but to what end? Like, what is this serving you, serving the greater good? And see what comes up.
I can't remember who said this, and I'll get this a little wrong, but there was a sort of a rubric for making decisions and where your time goes. I've heard this maybe 10 years ago. It was something like maybe it's like the 10-10-10-10 rule. Maybe you've heard of this, but it's like, will this matter in 10 minutes? Will this matter in 10 months? Will this matter in 10 years? And so if it matters in 10 minutes, maybe you got to spend time on this. If it will matter in 10 months, maybe. Or maybe it won't matter. Maybe if it won't matter. I can't recall which direction it is, but it allows you to sort of think long term. If this is going to have some impact in 10 months or 10 years, it's important to spend time on it. If it's going to be over in 10 minutes or 10 weeks, maybe it's just not that important. People will get over it, So I can't remember how that goes, but it's also a really useful framing for where my time goes. And will it be disappointed in 10 weeks? No. Well, then I'm not going to commit myself to the next 2 years on this board if in 10 weeks they've forgotten about my saying no,
Yeah, right. Or if it just isn't what you want to be spending your time doing, right? At some point it's like, ugh, I said yes to this and I really just don't want to do it.
Yeah. I've got one of those right now. In my personal life, I'm thinking, okay, how much longer is this term I agreed to? Because I can't wait to be done.
Well, I mean, the other thing I've really tried to come to grips with is when I do say yes to something or I decide to spend my time on something, then stop questioning it, right? Just show up and be there.
You said yes.
And be present.
Yeah.
Right? Like, or make a different decision. And then next time make a different decision. But to sit here and agonize over, is this really how I should be spending my time? And I wish I was somewhere else or whatever. It's like, it's just a waste of all the energies. So one thing that really stuck with me, and I don't think we actually aired it in an episode because it happened in one of our few prep meetings, but we've talked a lot about people leaving higher education, right? And this whole idea of, and we'll get into this a little bit in our next season, but we've talked a lot about people leaving higher ed or going higher ed adjacent. And we've had some guests that were that way. And then we had a conversation with a group of people where it's like, you're actually choosing to stay. And I don't know that we talked about that enough. I don't even know what enough is on the podcast, but it's something that stuck with me a lot of like, there is a whole group of people choosing to stay and do the work in higher ed on campus in those roles that are 24/7 and recreating or re-envisioning what that looks like. Do you have any kind of thoughts of what the future leadership or the future leader staying on campus looks like, shows up like?
Interesting question. And you previewed next season, which is great because for those listening, I think we do want to get much deeper into what does it look like going forward in higher ed. I was thinking as you were asking that question, I think I'd have to go back and look, but I think we had more people on the podcast who are in higher education than adjacent to, and those adjacent to, only a few at most, made the shift from higher ed to adjacent. So others were simply adjacent. That's where they've spent their careers. So I don't know that we had a lot of people that have chosen to leave on the podcast. Interesting. I hadn't thought about that till you asked it. Your question was really about what does a future of leadership look like? Oh, gosh. I don't know. I mean, I think that's what we have to really get into with our guests. What's been crossing my mind, and again, we'll get into this next season, is should we segment that a little bit? Maybe it looks different for different people in higher education. Maybe where you sit in the organization has a lot to do with how you feel about higher education and whether or not you're going to stay in it. And I even, for myself, I had a long run, 34 years. I am so proud of that. I regret none of it. I'm excited to be on the side of it because I think I can help differently. As I've said, I'm bullish on higher ed, but I don't know that I would want to rerun that 30 years. I'm happy on this side, but I loved the time in. So my departure, my transition had little to do with dissatisfaction or being disaffected by it, and more about wanting to contribute differently. So that's maybe another thing to explore a little bit. Why do people go? What is the motivation? It's tough. But does that automatically mean, therefore, I want to make a shift? Or is the tough what draws me? I loved the tough, actually, when I look back. I was bored in jobs that didn't have enough tough to them. I just didn't dig it. It was like, okay, this is it's interesting, but it's not very hard. And I liked it hard. So I don't know. It's a lot of words to an answer that was a simple question. Maybe because I don't have a great answer.
I think that's a fine answer. I mean, I think a lot of times it's easier to talk about leaving or going or changing. Maybe that's my bias. It's easier to talk about it that way. Either way, I think there's this opportunity of like when you choose to stay in a role and you are someone that's like in it for the long haul. I saw someone post on some social platform the other day that they had been in a role for 11 years and they started that role right out of college and they were shocked with themselves that they were able to stay with one company for 11 years and how is that possible? And it's like, you know what? That's actually really cool and rare in this day and age. I think a lot of times people are moving for whatever reason. So what's energizing people to stay longer term? What's good turnover? I think there's all sorts of conversation to be had around that.
Well, what I loved about the episode we recorded at NACAS in Toronto was the embrace of whatever works for you. For one of our guests on that episode, staying in one region but working at multiple institutions was exactly the right decision. For somebody else, it was moving around the country. And what's great is whatever works for you in your career, that's what you should do. No judgment, right? And for me, bouncing around a little bit, I worked at 5 universities over my on-campus career, and it was exactly what I needed to do for me. It meant a different kind of hard than staying in one place and finding fulfillment. But I think if staying in one place 11 years or 35 years or 40 is good for you, then perfect. Right on. You do you,
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. I didn't do that, obviously. I moved around.
I'm living in my 6th state, so.
Yeah. Yeah, you're the first part of your career, you were places much longer, right?
That's true.
In the last few years, you've made more moves.
Yeah, real fast.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that.
I took it personally because you were in Ann Arbor when I moved there. Or you were in Ann Arbor, right? I was in Grand Rapids.
Oh, yeah.
I moved back to Ann Arbor and you left. And so I thought, oh, my gosh.
I really just left the snow.
Yeah, well, that's good decision making.
Yeah, so as we wrap up season 1, we realized that there's seasons in podcasts. So we've decided to get on board with the trend and have a season. So this is the end of...
You mean we made it to season 2?
Well, I don't know.
Not yet. Not yet.
We're not there yet.
Yeah. Don't count your seasons before they're hatched.
That's right. Kenny Rogers part 2. So it is officially, though, end of season 1. What is something that you want to leave our listeners with? Any nugget, any kind of words of wisdom as we wrap this season up?
What's coming to mind immediately, I don't know if this is deep, is what I had just said, which is you do you. Leadership is your journey. Everybody has a different way to live it. It is full of bumps, maybe more bumps than smooth road. It is not easy. I mean, I think in an earlier episode I mentioned that I once researched how many, or Googled, I suppose. And research sounds so big, right? I Googled it.
The Dewey Decimal System in the library, and you're card cataloging it.
I looked up how many leadership books are written in a year, and it averaged 4 a day.
What?
Yeah. So when you count up the total number of books, I think I looked on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or something to figure how many books there were. There's a lot of books on this, and that doesn't count the seminars and the webinars and all these things. So why? Because it's hard, and everybody's looking for the answers, and there are different ways to do it and philosophies that guide how you approach it. And so I think the great thing about this season and the thing that I'm so appreciative of is all the different ways people practice leadership and all the ways that they acknowledge how hard it is and how gratifying it is. And it's your journey, your leadership, and you do you. I mean, I think that's however you're doing it. There are lots of books and webinars, but you do the way you do it. You do you, your leadership journey is yours. And there is no single answer or single way for it to be done. What about you?
I think that's right. 4 books a day?
Yeah.
That's truly amazing.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I love that perspective. And I think I've been sitting a lot with is our leadership skills scalable? And I think maybe you're giving me my answer in the sense of if there's 4 books a day, there's millions and millions of resources out there. It is so very personal. Mm-hmm. I think there are some baseline pieces for people to be thinking about and using, but the reality is the human connection, how you show that you care and create a space where people can feel cared for and seen in the work that they're doing. The rest kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and this sounds a little half empty, but I think it's done poorly more than it's done better. Well, I think we had some people on this year that are doing it really well. And they're examples of how it can be done personally, but done well. And, we read so many articles about bad decision-making and bad leadership and really unethical leadership in many cases in all kinds of industries. And so, who we had on this year are people that are human, who are thinking about the relationships, who care deeply about the mission of the organization, who are practicing their leadership with the skill that you mentioned, but also the humanity and the morality and the care that you're describing. I think we had people on that really show us it can be done well.
So season 2, we're going to reach out to all the crappy supervisors we've had.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We're going to
bring them on as guests.
We can do 1 a day. It's still 3 less than the books that come out per day.
We can bring them out here. But I do think, that makes me think of one other thing is, if you're out there and you're in an environment that you are not happy in, there's a place and space for you. Right? And I think sometimes it's like we as people kind of outwardly put the blame, like it's on the other person, it's on the culture, it's on this. And the reality is we all have choices to be and find those spaces and places that work for us and are a cultural fit for how we want to show up. So we're hopeful. If you haven't listened to the episodes in season 1, feel free to go back. There's 21 of them.
You have a semester break. We know you. You have lots of time between.
You do. You might be on airplanes or trains or in cars. Share them with your family. It's good for all sorts of industries.
Maybe you can listen to it as a family. That'd be exciting now, huh? Hey, kids.
Around the fireplace. Bundle up with a cup of cocoa. Listen to Loren and Kelsey and our guests. We would love to have you. Oh, well, and I do think we'll have a season 2 coming at you in 2024. So.
That's right. It'll be fun. Well, it's been a lot of fun to do this with you. I appreciate the invitation. It's been a learning experience, and Corey and Jen have been great coaches for me. I don't know about for you, if you've needed the coaching, but I did, and have been great coaches for me. So I'm grateful also for those who we don't hear very often on the microphone.
Agreed. I always need coaching. Yes. Thank you to everyone, and we'll see you next season.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Confidential is presented by Compass Group, produced by Corey Inscoe, with your hosts Kelsey Harmon Finn and Loren Rullman.